Welcome to Paranormal Nightshift, where the shadows tell their secrets and your chilling fan stories come to life. I'm your host, Gideon, guiding you through the unexplained, the eerie, and the downright hair-raising. Now, before we dive into tonight's story, I've got something special for you. Visit paranormalnightshift.com to claim your free copy of The Birth of Dimensional Desperado, the first ebook in our Dimensional Desperado series. Discover how Buck, Shadow Sheriff Freeman's journey into time-traveling paranormal adventures begins. Don't miss out. Now, let's get back to the darkness. Tonight's tale comes from one of our listeners who wants to remain anonymous, and it's titled, A Night I'll Never Forget. Get ready to be pulled into the unknown. This one might have you sleeping with the lights on. I was 7 years old, living in a small, run-down house in a ghetto neighborhood. Life wasn't easy. My parents were caught in a vicious cycle of drugs and alcohol, and their nightly fights were a constant in my life. The yelling, the crashes, and the sheer unpredictability of their rage made sleep impossible. Most nights, I lay awake, clutching my blanket like it was a shield against the chaos outside my bedroom door. But this night was different. The shouting had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. My parents had drunk themselves into unconsciousness, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the house was still. It should have been a relief, a rare chance to rest, but my body and mind didn't know how to handle the quiet. Fear had conditioned me to stay alert, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't sleep until the early morning hours. That night, as I lay in bed with my blanket pulled over my head, I heard something that froze me in place. My mom's voice. It was soft, like she was murmuring in the hallway outside my door. For a moment, I thought she'd woken up, but something felt off. My mum's drunken voice usually slurred or carried a sharp edge, but this was calm, almost distant. I turned over and looked toward the hallway door. The hallway light was always on, casting a sliver of illumination under my door. If someone stood there, their feet would block that light, casting shadows I knew all too well. But tonight, there were no shadows, just an empty, silent hallway. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light, something else caught my attention. My closet. The top shelf, where my folded clothes were usually neatly stacked, was moving. The clothes weren't just shifting slightly, like they might from a draft. They were writhing, undulating in a way that reminded me of worms squirming or the slow crawl of caterpillars. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared, unable to look away. The room felt colder, the kind of chill that seeped into your bones and made you feel small and vulnerable. I started to shake, though whether from the cold or fear, I couldn't tell. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something else. A small figure was sitting in the corner of my room, just to the side of the closet. It looked like a child, curled up in the fetal position with its back against the wall. Its head was down, and its shoulders shook as though it was crying. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything but lie there paralyzed. But I couldn't move. Instead, I closed my eyes tightly and prayed. I begged God to protect me, to make it all go away. My tiny voice, trembling and desperate, whispered over and over for help. I felt like I wasn't going to survive the night. Then, suddenly, a loud crash broke the silence. My dad's door slammed open, and I heard him muttering angrily about needing a drink. The sound startled me, jolting me out of my paralysis. I looked around the room. The figure in the corner was gone. The clothes in my closet were still. The icy chill that had enveloped the room dissipated, leaving behind only the lingering fear in my chest. I didn't dare question my luck. I pulled my blanket over my head and, somehow, fell asleep not long after. When I woke the next morning, I thought for a moment that it had all been a bad dream. But then I saw my mom standing in my room, screaming. Her face was pale and her voice was sharp, filled with confusion and anger. I had no idea what had set her off until I turned over and saw the wall behind me. It was covered in long streaks of blood red, almost brown, drips that had dried overnight. They stretched across the entire wall, originating from the direction of the closet. I turned to look at the closet, dreading what I might see. My folded clothes were no longer stacked neatly. They were jumbled and messy, as if someone or something had rifled through them in a frenzy. I wanted to tell my mom what had happened, to explain everything, but I couldn't find the words. I just sat there in silence, staring at the evidence of what I'd experienced. Together, we cleaned the wall, scrubbing away the dried streaks until the surface was spotless. We never spoke about it again, but I couldn't stop thinking about that night, especially when my little sister started talking about her imaginary friend. She would always play in the same spot where I had seen that small figure curled up in the corner. She laughed and chatted as though her friend was real, and every time I saw her sitting there, my stomach twisted in knots. Years later, after my parents' violent behavior finally led CPS to remove us from their custody, I went to live with my grandma. Life was quieter, safer, but that house and that night stayed with me. One day, I overheard a story that sent shivers down my spine. A young girl had gone missing years ago, last seen at the house where we used to live. Suddenly, everything clicked. The crying figure, the cold room, the chaos in my closet. It wasn't just my imagination. Whatever was in that house, whatever had tried to reach me that night, wasn't just a figment of my fear. I don't know if it was the missing girl's spirit or something darker, but I'll never forget the feeling that for a moment I was staring into the unknown. And that wraps up this thrilling journey into the unknown. To the person who wants to remain anonymous, thank you so much for sharing your incredible story with us. If you enjoyed this episode, consider supporting the show. You can join us on Patreon for an ad-free experience and exclusive access to all future adventures of the Dimensional Desperado. Plus, Patreon members get extra perks, so don't miss out. Not ready for Patreon? No problem. You can still support us by subscribing to the podcast on Spotify and YouTube. While you're there, drop a comment and let us know what you thought about this episode. Your feedback means the world to us. And don't forget to visit paranormalnightshift.com to grab your free copy of The Birth of Dimensional Desperado, the first ebook in the series. It's the perfect way to dive even deeper into Buck Shadow Sheriff Freeman's wild and mysterious adventures. Finally, if you've got a story of your own, don't be shy. Head over to Paranormal Nightshift to submit it. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and stay tuned for more spine-chilling tales from Paranormal Nightshift.